Mm.
Alright, so first and foremost, how do I tabletop? So, well, everyone who's here presently is very familiar with tabletop, but I will start from the very beginning, anyways. So, tabletop is a pretty broad term. Tabletop incorporates, of course, not only tabletop RPGs like Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinders, Call of Cthulhu, whatever else tickles your boat. That's a weird turn of phrase. Anyways, it also incorporates things like, say, Warhammer 40k, Hero Clicks, Mech Clicks, whatever involves playing games on a tabletop. And D&D is typically referred to tabletop, or I suspect it is, because traditionally speaking, you sit there and you play it on a table. You have yourself with what's called a character sheet, you have dice, and you have whatever else, maybe some snacks. And tabletop, I've heard, and when you're talking about Dungeons and Dragons, I've heard it often referred to as described similar to a choose your own adventure book. Essentially, you have someone called a dungeon master or game master, depending on the system involved, and they are acting as a narrator. They describe the world around, they describe the people you interact with, the events that are happening, and they often play the parts of those sort of people that you'd be interacting with. You, as the player, or if you are a player, the way you play the game is like this. Essentially, put yourself in the shoes of your character. For the time being, while you're playing the game, you are your character. Now, if your character's someone who's not normally you, or if that's just you with those awesome powers, that's entirely up to you. There's no real right or wrong way to play the game per se. Some people like to play the game to beat up monsters. Some people like to play the game to get loot. Some people like to play the game to have the opportunity to experience being a character that they've always wanted to try being. Some people are there for the story. Whatever floats your boat. It's a game, and at the end of the day, if you're having fun, you're doing it right. That said, when you are playing tabletop, generally speaking, you are free to do with your character as you wish. If you want to talk to another person you see, say in a tavern, you would simply say, "Well, I would like to talk to the shifty-looking gnome over in the corner." And then, typically speaking, your game master or dungeon master would say, "All right." As you approach the gnome, he looks up to you and says in a small, scruffy voice, "What do you want?" And then you, as a player, would respond with whatever you wish to respond with. If you're new to the experience of tabletop, trying to figure out what to do in a situation, what you can do, where you can go, so on and so forth, it can be a bit daunting to figure out at first. But it's really not. Once you get used to it, it's perfectly fine. Kind of a good way of looking at it is imagine yourself in that situation and then just pretending that you're there. Pretending that you are doing what you want to do and going where you'd be interested in going. Now, I do want to add a small caveat to that. I've noticed when people have started playing tabletop games such as Dungeons and Dragons, for the first time, there's a tendency for them to act as they would if they were playing a single player RPG, like, say, Skyrim, or insert your favorite JRPG here. In which case, oftentimes, they will, act as they will begin just acting in, I guess the best way to put it is strange ways. Essentially, what I'm getting at is when you do things, they have consequences. In Skyrim, if you put a bucket on the merchant's head and take their goods, well, you get off scot free. Or if you kill the town guard, whatever have you. If you're a jerk to whoever follows you along, then they're just a they're just a piece of code and they're not going to respond. When you're playing tabletop, however, one must always remember that you're interacting with a living, breathing world, and you're interacting with other people as well. So when you decide to steal the money from another player, remember, that's a person you're stealing that money from, not just some random NPC on the street or a random piece of code. When you decide to murder the shopkeeper and take his goods, the town will probably know what you've done, and there may be very real world repercussions for your actions. This, of course, isn't to say if that's what you want to do, don't do it, period, the end. Just be aware that because you're interacting with real people as opposed to computer code, you're both free to do things that you'd never thought to have done, but at the same time, your actions carry a lot more weight and consequence than they would have normally. As this interesting side example, for those of you are familiar with the show Slayers, there's two main characters. There's actually a main cast, but the show focuses on two main characters. One is the protagonist named Lena Inverse, and basically her bumbling sidekick, as it were, named Gowry. Now, the reason I bring this up is because I remember I was playing a game once with a friend who was brand new to tabletop, and he begun treating another player in a way that he wanted to establish a Lena Gowry relationship with his character and this other player's character. In which case, basically, you have a strong lead and a subordinate bumbling sidekick. What he didn't realize, of course, is what it would feel like to be that bumbling sidekick. And suffice to say that other player had no interest in that arrangement. And once I pointed it out to him, he was like, oh, I didn't think about that. Now then, moving on to the actual logistics and mechanics of the game. So tabletop, at its core, is an interesting blend of skill and chance. Most tabletop games rely on dice rolls. Now, exactly what size the dice are, which dice do you use, varies from system to system. Some systems use exclusively six-sided dice, which are the sort of dice you would see in a normal game, like Yahtzee or Monopoly or whatever else have you. Those dice are a dime a dozen, sometimes literally. Others will use more unique shaped dice. For example, Dungeons & Dragons uses several different dice. One of them is 20-sided, another one has 8 different sides, one has 4 different sides, often referred to as the caltrop, because if it sits on the ground it points up and it's very painful to step on. I can speak from experience. And typically speaking, the way it works is you will create a character that you're interested in playing, a character you're interested in being. For example, I've played a number of different characters. I once played a dwarf who loved being the front line of battle, but he was also a raging alcoholic. I have never had a drop of alcohol in my life, but I played this character basically to the hilt. I had another character I played that he was technically a bard, but he was the biggest scumbag in the multiverse. Well, sort of. But he did spend quite a bit of time hopping the multiverses. I've played another character who was, for those of you who are anime fans, essentially an anime protagonist. He was loud, he was brash, and he dealt with lots of explosions around him. And he was surprisingly tough. So basically, you make your character, find some cool abilities to use with them, and you sit down at your table and then you basically play that character. And oftentimes when you want to do something, like let's say you want to attack a creature, or you want to accomplish a task, it will require you to roll a dice. Again, depending on the system, will depend on what dice you will roll. For D&D, typically speaking, you roll a 20-sided dice. You will roll this dice, you'll look at whatever number's on top, and then you may add, your character sheet will modify that number you've rolled, depending on a number of variables. For example, let's say you're trying to break open a door. If your character is very strong, that will increase the number you have rolled on the d20. The higher the number, the higher the total, I should say, the higher the odds are you are successful in your endeavor of breaking down that door. Conversely, if you're a bumbling, clumsy fool, and you're trying to avoid, say, a dart trap that's shooting darts at you, you'd roll this 20-sided dice, and odds are, because of the way your character works, it would lower the number you have rolled. Essentially subtracting whatever numbers are applicable from the number you have rolled. And odds are you'll get a whole bunch of darts in your face, or posterior, or backside, or wherever the darts happen to land, and make life very unpleasant to to you. In addition to this, to get a little meta, in a sense, many tabletop games are, if you strip it down and look at it, games of calculated chance. Using the dice brings in essentially percentages. If you're using a 20-sided dice, each side of the die is a 5%. So depending on how skilled you are in something, is essentially the percentage chance you have of succeeding, modified by the percentage you roll on the dice, in a sense. But, as I said, with tabletop games, knowing how to build your character, how to customize your character, how to work with your character, is where the skill comes in, and recognizing how to work with a situation, how to understand a situation, how to seize an opportunity. For example, let us take some combat. We are currently fighting inside of a cave. Now, the most straightforward way of settling this combat is simply you draw all your weapons, charge in there, and you beat each other senseless until one side stands victorious. Now, because this is a tabletop game, other options open up. Let's say, for example, you decide to be a really good idea to pick up one of your fallen foes and use them as a body shield as you charge through the enemy lines. Well, that's very feasible, and they'd have to figure out how that works. And if you built your character to be skilled in that sort of thing, not necessarily that thing specifically, but let's say they're strong, and they're also agile, and they're very cognizant of how battle ebbs and flows, then odds are they have a very good chance of succeeding in their attempt of barging through the enemy lines while using their fallen enemy as a body shield the entire time. Conversely, let's say, for example, you're a spellcaster, and you decide that you should collapse the roof upon your enemies, or the ceiling, I should say, of the cavern. Well, if you are skilled in magic and you happen to have the right kind of magic, or your spellcaster knows the right kind of magic for it, that will greatly increase your chances of successfully causing the roof or the ceiling to collapse down upon your enemies. And if you're really good, you might not crush yourself and your friends in the process. So, playing tabletop I love it. I love it because it's very freeing. It allows me to take on a persona that I don't normally take. It allows me to explore either sections of my own personality that I've never really explored before, or perhaps it's things that allow me to interact with the world where I normally would be able to. It's a team game. You know, when you work together with the other players to overcome a massive obstacle, it feels really good because you worked hard to do it. And if you're on the other side, when you're the DM or the GM, you feel really good when the people who are playing the game that you have designed are enjoying themselves. All in all, I think tabletop is a great experience. It's definitely a team game. It's one that requires communication. It's a social game, to be sure. And it's a game that I find is a beautiful way to just sort of whisk yourself away for a little while and just be elsewhere. It's kind of like reading a really good book that you're writing as you're reading it. And I think that basically covers most of the basics I was thinking of. At this point, I will open up to questions. Do any of you have any questions you would like to ask at this time? You may feel free to use voice or text.
No, I just got here. I don't know what questions to ask.
Fair enough. Right now we're talking about how do I tabletop, and I talked over some brief the way tabletop games work, sort of general concepts of what they are, how you interact with them, how you play them, the way they work mechanically, so on and so forth. And this is a QA section for anybody who has any things they've been wondering about, or any tips or advice that they might be looking for. Say, for example, you have a character you want to play, but you're not sure how to play them, or you've been thinking about picking up a new system, but you're not sure how to learn a new system, or even.
All right, here's a
Mm-hmm.
here's a question. Have you ever like tried any other sort of game system other than D&D and its spin-offs?
The systems I have under my belt are the various forms of D&D. I technically played a little bit of Call of Cthulhu based on the D20 system. I
Hmm.
played a game called Besm, Big Eye Small Mouth, which was an anime version of D&D, or I should say it was an anime system that used the engine of D&D.
Mm-hmm.
And then I used another system called 13th Age, which is
Oh, I've heard of that.
it is amazing. I love 13th Age. It is my favorite system I've ever played, hands down. Just straight up. And I would have, truth be told, when I founded the server, I would have totally founded it on 13th Age, but D&D was a bigger name.
Well, when you finish like FOF in 7 years,
Yeah.
you should start the 13th Age campaign.
About it. And also, but that's beside the point. That's slightly off topic. So I do have,
Yeah.
I have experienced other tabletop systems, and I've known people who have. Oh, I'm sorry. And I played one of my earliest exposures was a game called Rifts.
Rifts?
Yes, Rifts. It
As in RIFTS?
correct. Is an old system. Came out in the 80s and 90s, and the premise behind it, or premise, depending on how you want to say it, is basically the apocalypse happened. Great ley lines have opened up across the world, and where lands intersected, these nexon, opened up, and interdimensional beings just flooded Earth. And Earth was in the middle of a golden age of technology at that time, and just basically sent it almost back to the Stone Age. And now Earth is humanity is sort of struggling to find its place, and it's scattered, and it's a world of collected city-states and small factions here and there. And in this world, first off, it uses a completely different system than anything else. I think it uses like D10s as its base.
Mm.
And you can actually play whatever type of character you want. If you actually want to play a high fantasy character, that actually has mechanics for that. If you want to play pure technology, you can do that. And yes, they have techno wizards. If you want to smash the two together, you can do that. You want to be a psychic who's constantly hooked up on drugs, you can do that. The idea is the system that allows you. Well, I don't know if that was the idea when they designed it, but it's a system that allows you to play basically whatever you wanted. When I played it, I played two characters. One was a character who would burst in flames, but couldn't fly. And another one was this giant elephant-like creature. I don't remember much outside of the fact he was super strong.
Mm. Well, the reason I asked that is the follow-up question. Based on like your experiences with all of these different, I guess, game systems, would you say that there's anything that you think that D&D in particular is particularly lacking, and you wish that it had from other systems?
D&D at its core is a combat-oriented system. Its main idea is you go into the dungeon, you get the loot, you save, basically dungeon, kill the dragon, save the princess. So D&D is very much based around combat. Other systems I've seen, like 13th Age, combat is an important part of it, but there's a lot more mechanics for stuff outside of combat. Basically the stuff that you can do when you're RPing. And I feel D&D focuses much more on the combat than it does the RP side of things.
Mm.
Which, if that's what you want out of the game, that's fine. Me, I love to RP. And D&D has the basic mechanics in place for it, but it doesn't work as well as other systems as far as mechanically supporting RP.
Yeah, that's why I noticed that too.
It is particularly, well, depending on which version of D&D you go with. In 13th Age, its skill system is unique in that you actually create your own skills. Specifically, what you have is you have you have backgrounds, and you have 5, I think. Or is it 8? 8, I think it is. You have 8 skills. And what you do is you invent your own backgrounds, and you can put up to 5 skills in one background. For example, you create the background Paranormal Investigator. Or one I had was called Angelic Singer. And then what you do is when you face the situation, you look at the background you've invented and figure out which one of them is applicable to the situation you want to use, and then you roll based on that. Versus having the D&D pre-constructed list of skills and trying to figure out which skill fits to which situation. Which, it's fun. It's fun because it allows you, in a sense, more flexibility and more customization with your character. But also, if you inadvertently create a bad skill, it kind of sucks to be you. But the trick is, though, you don't want to have a skill that is too broad, because then it's not fun. Like, for example, I think the background, quote unquote, adventurer, I think is straight up like not allowed, because it's too broad and it applies to everything. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
How many types? How big is the range of tabletop gaming in general? What I've mostly seen is the ones that we've had here, which are Skyrim, and Thems Herds, and I've also seen the pony ones. But how broad can a tabletop game be?
It could be really anything, really.
Do you
Like,
So to clarify with your question, do you mean how far has the tabletop game extended in our culture?
Yeah.
Okay. So the essentially it's probably safe to say if it's popular enough, there's probably a tabletop game version of it. And if not an official version, maybe a fan-made version. If not a fan-made version, there's probably some fan out there working on it. Take, for example, Monster Rancher. Monster Rancher is a fairly popular game, and we actually have someone here on the server who is attempting to develop a tabletop version of that game. So it's pretty perversive. It's just about everywhere. And there is it even permeates into popular culture. I mean, for those who've seen Stranger Things, Dungeons and Dragons plays a very important role in that series. But even that said, there are Star Wars tabletop games. There's I mentioned Call of Cthulhu earlier. It wouldn't surprise me if someone out there decided to see if they couldn't create a say a Firefly tabletop game. I've seen a few attempts at creating fighting game versions for tabletop, or incorporating fighting game mechanics into tabletop. Like, let's say if you want to play Ryu from the Street Fighter series. So
there is a tabletop system called Toon, which is set in a cartoon world of the 1930s and 40s. That's cool.
I mentioned that there are a few systems that try and make it so you can do an anime version of tabletop. So tabletop is pretty widespread. If you have an interest in something, odds are there's probably someone there, at least something nerdy. Odds are there's probably someone who's either developed a version of tabletop or is doing something with it. Like,
cool.
Heck, it wouldn't surprise me if someone out there tried to make a tabletop version of sports ball, as it were.
Isn't that called foosball?
Foosball.
But yeah,
isn't that just FIFA and Madden?
It wouldn't surprise me if there was someone out there trying to develop tabletop systems for football.
I guess technically fantasy football is sort of a I guess tabletop version of football.
Kinda, but there's less sitting down at a table and rolling dice.
I guess.
Any other questions?
Have you ever thought of making your own?
Yes, actually, a few times. As far as just creating one wholesale, I don't think I've ever thought about that. But I've certainly thought about trying to do adaptations. For example, I've toyed with the idea of trying to convert 2 games that I played that I really liked. I thought about trying to make a Final Fantasy VII tabletop, which I'm sure exists.
Hmm.
And then another one was based off of a much less known game by the same company called Saga Frontier. I really like the game. It's not complete. You can tell it was rushed out the door, but it's an important part of my childhood, and I really liked it. If it didn't explain its mechanics very well, it's actually a really hard game, but that's beside the point. Um, so, yes and no. So yes and no. Any other questions?
Hmm. I've I've always felt it complicated just looking at it at a character sheet and all the things that anything. Is there a way that I could look at and not make it seem so intimidating for a tabletop and making a character? At least.
That actually links into what I'm going to do in the next hour after this. But that's
Oh,
a
is it
really
the next hour?
no, that's a really good question, and I think that's worth talking about here, as well as the next section. So, I find the best way to look at it is because learning a new system is intimidating, particularly if you've never played tabletop before. What I find is if you're approaching a new system, go with something basic. Yeah, if there's a certain character you really want to play, I would say save that character for later. Don't make that your first character. Rather,
Don't play as a wizard first.
yes, don't play as a wizard first.
Wait.
What I would do
Wait a
is
minute.
what I would recommend is to basically pick something that will help you learn this system. Something simple, something fairly straightforward. And if you know someone who plays that system, that makes things 1,000 better. Because then you can personally, hey, so I'm interested in learning the system, and I'd like to play it. Great, what do you want to play? Well, I just want to make something simple for my first character. Maybe a bruiser. Or maybe, throw out a couple concepts you'd be interested in trying out. And then hopefully who you know will help you refine that and help guide you through the mechanics. If you don't have anyone on hand to help you, I would say still go for a simple concept. And then approach it with that. Say, alright, I want to make a spellcaster that uses the powers of nature, right? You approach,
Druid.
you approach the system and you say, does this exist in the system I want to use? Let's say, for example, you're approaching a Star Wars system. You're like, okay, well, that doesn't really work too well. Well, what if I wanted to create a quote-unquote spellcaster that throws things around? Like, say, a psychic would or something like that. Well, then you look at it like, oh, well, this Jedi thing seems to be able to do that. So I would say explore the mechanics in the context of the idea that you have that you're looking for. Because if you just approached it to learn it all at once, it's not going to work. Rather, if you approach it with a purpose, then that will help you narrow down and help you focus on what you need to learn. And then as you experience that, grow a little bit. Next time you make a character, make a different character, but still use a simpler concept. And then once you have the system down and you understand how it works, then make that character you've been waiting to make. That way you can make that character the right way and the way you've always wanted that character to be.
Yeah, make my Sith druid.
Yes. Does that help?
Yeah. I think, yeah, just go with something you're more familiar with, and then once you feel you got the hang of it, just go to more complicated stuff or
Exactly.
complicated characters.
There's nothing wrong with starting simple. In fact, 13th Age, funny enough, actually at the start of its classes section actually has a section about the difficulty of its classes to play, from least difficult and most straightforward to most complicated. For people who are interested in getting to it. I'm sorry, I just love 13th Age. I'll just gush about it for days. Fun fact: one of the lead designers for Dungeons and Dragons designed 13th Age. He and another guy left.
Not surprised.
Left when I don't know why. Apparently, Wizards of the Coast likes firing its lead designers from time to time. There's like a rhythmic, I don't know why, but basically they're like, right. So they went and made it, So it's got basically the best parts of D&D and the best. It's just it's a fabulous system. If you're looking for what I feel is a really good system, 13th Age I think is one of the best systems on the market.
So I forget what's going on in here right now.
We're wrapping up How Do I Tabletop. Up next will be tips and tricks for character creation.
Okay.
So basically just spent about 45 minutes talking about the basic concepts of tabletop and how it works. Before we wrap up, we have about 5 minutes yet. Does anybody have any last minute questions?
I was about to say, if do you recommend any tabletop ones, or at least what are your top favorites? Top 5 favorites.
I actually, 13th Age is definitely probably my favorite. I actually really like Dungeons and Dragons for what it is. I like 4th edition Dungeons and Dragons because it plays like a tabletop MMO. If you're not into MMOs, don't let that scare you. I like its combat system a lot. It really feels like I'm playing a tactical board game, and I thoroughly enjoy it. Although there's a certain point when mechanics just stop working and stop being cool and fun and all that jazz. But I really like fourth edition, even though a lot of people will tell you it's not good. 5th edition, I enjoy the simplicity of it. I really liked Rifts. It's a very complicated system, but the sheer flexibility of what you can do with that world setting is, you're very hard pressed to compare with it. And I think that would be, and then I would make a case also for Dungeons and Dragons 3rd edition, but I wouldn't really say it's my favorite edition. That one doesn't work very well. It's very easy to break it, and it's very unbalanced. So if I had to offer a tier list, I would say number 1 is 13th Age. After that is probably 4th edition. Followed by that would be Rifts, even though I haven't played it in years. I can't even tell you how long it's been since I played that game. And then after that would probably be 5th edition. But
then again, it really depends on like what kind of game style you want.
Exactly. It really depends on what you want. If you really like combat, D&D is the way to go, especially 4th edition, in my opinion. If that's what you love, if you love RP, 13th Age has got your back. Especially since they have a built-in mechanic to help you. They have this beautiful mechanic that you can actually succeed in an RP situation. Like, it's a mechanical system. Like, if you don't know what to do, you can call upon this mechanic, and then you and the DM figure out how your character succeeds. It's a hard mechanic. It's great. I love it. All right. 2 minutes. Any last quick questions?
Why is Longhorn Con the best campaign on the server?
Well, the answer to that question lies in your own mental delusions. All right.
I think suffice it to say, there are no more questions regarding basic tabletop, because we all know basic tabletop. So why don't we go to character creation?
Right on. Thank you. And that was How Do I Tabletop?